Okay, now we actually have our cluster assignments, but how do we know what these cluster assignments mean? How are they useful to us? First, we need to interpret what they mean so that we can use these cluster assignments to our advantage somehow. So in order to do that, I'm going to copy these cells here, the metadata about our various offers. Copy that into a new tab here, a blank sheet. And I'm going to label these columns 1, 2, and 3. Hi and j are labeled 1, 2, and 3 for our clusters 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to do a sumif function. And I am going to select the assigned clusters. We've got some conditions here. This is sort of a conditional sum, right? We're going to sum up something if that cluster assignment is equal to, and right now we're dealing with cluster 1, so I'm going to select this H1 cell, which just has a 1 in it. So if their assigned cluster is 1, sum up how many people actually took that deal, the first offer number 1, which is represented by this first row here. Close parentheses, press enter, and now we have a 0 there. So 0 people in cluster 1 took offer number 1. Now, one thing I need to do is make some constants here. So for K38 through DF38, that's going to be completely constant, both the rows and the columns. So I'm going to put some dollar signs there. And then we're going to make the row constant for the cluster assignment. So we have 1, 2, and 3 there. And then we will simply make the columns constant for the deals. And press enter. Drag that across. And that should give me some useful information. And all this information represents, for example, is say, okay, now I'm clicked on H8, which is offer number 7, the Prosecco, and that's how many people in cluster 1 purchased that offer. So there were 12. So I'm going to throw a little conditional formatting on here so that we can see the colors very easily. And then I'm going to apply some filtering across all of these rows by going to data, filter. And this is how the author shows us that we can understand these clusters. So I will sort that descending, and you can see 18 people. The most popular deal for cluster 1 was offer number 30, which was the Malbec minimum quantity 6. And you can see that these green numbers here, those were the most popular deals for cluster 1. And if you look across, what do they all have in common? Well, they all have a minimum quantity of 6. So it looks like the minimum quantity for all the other deals was much higher. So you could think of maybe cluster 1 sort of represents your cheapskate cluster. These people in cluster 1, they love their wine, but they don't want to spend too much money. They want to get a small amount. That's all they can afford, so they buy whenever the minimum quantity is low. All right, let's sort descending on cluster 2. And it looks like the most popular deal there was the October Pinot Noir. So the most popular deals here seem to be Pinot Noir and Champagne. And I don't really see anything else that's super definitive about what those deals have in common. It just seems to me that there's a lot of people in cluster 2 that seem to like Pinot Noir and Champagne. And then cluster 3, I look at the most popular deal there is Champagne, and if you look at all of the most popular deals, they are, well, the vast majority of them are some sort of sweet sparkling wine, right? Champagne and Prosecco, right? Prosecco is something I didn't even know about until a couple of years ago, but it's an Italian sparkling wine. And right, Malbec's a bit of an outlier here, but you can see cluster 3 likes sweet sparkling wines. Now, if you went through the example in your text, the author goes through solving for 4 clusters and solving through 5 clusters. In our case, we solved for 3 just so you could see it from a different angle. If you solve for a different number of clusters, you might see clusters that look a little bit different. They're going to be defined a little bit differently. For example, whenever you solve for 4 clusters, it seems to parse apart those a Pinot Noir cluster, it seems to be there's a cluster of people who just love different kinds of Pinot Noir versus another group who seems to like champagne, and they're sort of differentiated a little bit better with 4 clusters. So that's how we can interpret the clusters. In a real life situation, you might use some various other statistics to actually do this. This is sort of just a textbook example, but that's the concept. And I wanted you to get that's kind of what's going on when you do a k-means cluster analysis, and then how you go about interpreting the clusters. So I'll see you soon.